Why is it that most of us take public transport in London, Singapore, or Tokyo, but we don't in our own country? Why is it that we enjoy pedestrian street across Europe and Asia, but we are never able to walk in our cities? Why is it that when we go to the Netherlands, we cycle naturally, but we don't do that in Indian cities? Why is it that we want to live in such cities in other countries and enjoy them, but nobody in the political circles think any of us would want these in our Indian cities? Who makes these choices? Why do we put up with dirty cities but not vote on these issues at the ballot box? Hi, I am Sathya Sankaran. Welcome to another episode of the OoruLabs podcast explainer series. Let's see if we can answer this question in today's episode. In episode 6, we spoke about the evolution of the government and the social contract. We understood why we got into the social contract. It was to prevent violation of natural rights, preventing market failures, protecting public goods, and provisioning common good infrastructure. If you want to know more about this concept, you should listen to the previous episodes, especially episode 6, 5, and 4 of season 3, just the previous ones. And for good measure, the other as well, the other episodes as well. But let's get on with this. Why is the government unable to give us the cities we deserve? As we saw from those previous episodes, the way to correct market failures or negative externalities such as congestion and pollution in cities is to have the government step in and level the playing field with coercive policies. But public choice economists point out that there is also such a thing as government failure. We should know a lot about that in India. That is, there are reasons why the government intervention does not achieve the desired effect. Public choice theory is a branch of economics that emerged in the 50s and received widespread public attention in 1986 when James Buchanan, along with his colleague Gordon Tullock, was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics. Public choice takes the same principles that economists use to analyze people's actions in the marketplace and applies them to people's actions in collective decision making. Economists who study behavior in the private marketplace assume that people are rational and are motivated mainly by self interest. Although most people base some of their actions on their concern for others, the dominant motive in people's actions in the marketplace, whether they are employers, employees, or consumers, is a concern for themselves. Public choice economists make the same assumption that although people acting in the political marketplace have some concern for others, their main motive, whether they are voters, politicians, lobbyists, or bureaucrats, is self interest, which means they will do what it takes to protect their interest, which for a politician might be getting voted back to power after their term. He or she will use the basic human traits of fear, greed, envy to align you to their interest. So, how do we use this to solve collective action problems? One of the chief underpinnings of public choice theory is the lack of incentives for voters to monitor government effectively. Anthony Downs, in one of the earliest public choice books, An Economic Theory of Democracy, pointed out that the voter is largely ignorant of political issues and that this ignorance is rational. Even though the result of an election may be very important, an individual's vote rarely decides an election. It matters collectively only. Thus, the direct impact of casting a well informed vote is almost nil. The voter has virtually no chance to determine the outcome of election based on the issues that are not collectively available and understood. So, spending time getting to the bottom of issues is not personally worthwhile for the voter. So you end up holding on to some rhetoric that is in the public domain and the media. It taps onto fear, greed, or envy and not issues. Again, public choice economists point out that this incentive to be ignorant is rare in the private sector. Someone who buys a car typically wants to be well informed about the car they select. That is because the car buyer's choice is decisive. He or she pays only for the one chosen. If the choice is wise, the buyer will benefit. If it is unwise, the buyer will suffer directly. Voting lacks that kind of direct result. Therefore, most voters largely are ignorant about the positions of the people for whom they vote. Except for a few highly publicized issues, they do not pay a lot of attention to what legislative bodies do. And even when they do pay attention, they have little incentive to gain the background knowledge and analytic skill needed to understand the issues. And this is one of the primary goals of this podcast as well. How can you use mental models to make decisions on things you know nothing about? These are concepts that are useful for you tomorrow to understand that personal actions, collective actions, the incentives that drive certain choices that are being made in the political side, why governments exist, what are your biases, how do you have to understand biases of that you carry, how do you do think slow or think fast to make decisions, how do you then update your Bayesian prayers. All of these things are important for you to know so that you know why people are doing what they do and how to get around and get things that progressively move us forward, right? Although legislators are expected to pursue the public interest, they make decisions on how to use other people's resources, not their own, right? It's the tax money. Politicians may intend to spend the taxpayer money wisely. Efficient decisions, however, will neither save their money nor give them any proportion of the wealth that they save for the citizens. There is no direct reward for fighting powerful interest groups in order to confer benefits on a public that is not even aware of the benefits or of who conferred them. Why do you think politicians do ribbon cutting and stand for inaugurations? They want you to remember they gave you this infrastructure or made this policy because there is no other reward that they get in spending your money wisely. They would much rather cater to interest groups and get something for themselves in their self-interest rather than spend your money wisely, so that your money is never going to be spent wisely. That is why they put their photos on public spending. They want you to know how they're spending your money. This can be a double-edged sword. Wasteful and interest group spending that hurts the population might backfire, so they take the chance. Thus, the incentives for good management in public interest are weak. In contrast, interest groups are organized by people with very strong gains to be made from governmental actions. They provide politicians with campaign funds and campaign workers. In return, they receive at least the ear of the politician and they often gain support for their goals. This is why lobbyists spend time in the legislature getting issues to be included. This is why road projects for motor vehicles are popular because they are always in Vidansa with other contractors, even if it destroys the cities in the long run. In other words, because legislators have the power to tax and to extract resources in other coercive ways, and because voters monitor their behavior poorly, legislators behave in the ways that are costly to citizens. Some of these economists have developed a separate and quite mathematical discipline known as social choice. There's bad news there. Social choice traces its roots to early work by Nobel Prize winning economist Kenneth Arrow. Arrow's 1951 book, The Social Choice and Individual Values, attempted to figure out through mathematical logic whether people who have different goals can use voting to make collective decisions that please everyone. He concluded that they cannot, and thus his argument is called the Impossibility Theorem. He used mathematics to apply to a ranked voting system of many candidates. Even if people have all possible information about candidates, the theorem proves that it is impossible to construct any procedure that results in a collectively rational expression of individual desires in that group. It basically proves that your individual choice, without regard for social cause, will never be able to solve collective problems. We know collectively for the city, we all will be better off choosing mass transport systems, cycling, walking to remove pollution and congestion. But we are unable to agree on this or even bring this up actively to make it a political choice. However, each of us buy cars and ply them for our comfort and convenience. This is the easiest thing to do because there is an asymmetry of information between individual and the collective. How do we align individual interest and collective interest? This is where removing the asymmetry between interested actors or by interested actors and collectives come into the picture. Means if there is enough conversation around potential good solutions, and it reaches the ears of the politicians, there is bound to be an inclusion in the agenda. This is the only way to get around the impossibility theorem. Collective good cannot naturally arise without a deliberate effort to leverage the public choice self interest in the government and reduce the information asymmetry in the individual choices. Let me use an example that I understand well. I care about cycling as a commute. I do that because I can get to work faster than people in the car. I get my workout, I save money. I have made personal choices. These personal choices are easy because they are in my self interest. However, I do not know how many people are also cycling in the city. I do not know if my individual choice has a direct result on the air quality in the city because I don't know how many else are avoiding motor vehicles. I also do not know which candidate for elections or officers in the bureaucracy care about a city which is friendly for cycling. I do not have information about how many people cycle to work. So it becomes an issue that many people care about. I use the Altmo platform to put my cycle commute miles on the dashboard to be counted. I took an individual action on this tool. I made a personal choice, but it collectivizes many individual cyclists and shows how many others are in the community. So I've chosen a tool that can help me bridge the information gap actively. It also tells me how much I have benefited the collective along with personal benefits. So now I know how many other people are commuting. Tools like this help bridge the information asymmetry among individual choices. Did you know the data from this tool was used in the comprehensive mobility plan of 2020 to specify that the city of Bengaluru should build 600 kilometers of cycle tracks? I bet no one knows. But public choice theory shows the politicians want to give you other choices that makes her collectively worse off. And this information is not available to many people. And it is costly for you to understand. How many other things you have to understand? Now that you know public choice theory and how collective action is not a guarantee if we continue to make individual choices with the asymmetry in information, the question is, how should we make issues a political agenda? How do we know the government candidate and the actors are going to give out collective outcomes and create a vision for the collective without falling prey to self interest or giving us short term populist gains but long term worse outcomes? How do you know these are long term worst outcomes? How do you evaluate them? How do we also begin to make personal choices that reflect the collective good? Let me know in the comments below. See you in the next episode.